The 5 Love Languages. How to Express Heartfelt Commitment to Your Mate by Gary Chapman. This is our book of the week. This is by far one of the foundational books that I always encourage my clients to read. In fact, Danielle and I read it even before we got married. When we were dating, we knew that we wanted to have a healthy relationship, so we figured out that this was one of the core books that everyone was reading, and guess what? We're still using the principles to this day. And so what's awesome about Gary Chapman is that he really understood that many couples struggle in their relationship. Whether you are in your dating season, your committed courtship, your engagement, or your marriage, regardless of the season of your relational status, there are things that you can actually take from the book and begin to apply and use it throughout the entire course of that relationship. So to give you context, what we're going to do is break down what these 5 love languages are. It's so interesting. So many people are in relationships for years and they feel like their partner just doesn't know who they are. That in essence, they've been operating on autopilot. And so this will help them to identify their own love language, their partner's love language, so that they can effectively communicate their love for one another. It has been said that most people get married because they fall in love. Most people get divorced because they fall out of love. So the only way that you can maintain that in-love feeling is if you have a clear understanding of the love languages that need to be communicated. So it's interesting. He gives this concept called your love tank. Now think about a car. The only way that a car can go from point A to point B is if you put gas in the car, right? The gas allows that car to move in a forward direction. Well, likewise, in your own life, we all have a love tank. And it is up to your partner to do their best to deposit love units into that tank. They can also withdraw love units, if you will, from that tank. So in order for your relationship to move forward, there's got to be constant deposits on a daily and consistent basis. So love language number 1 would be words of affirmation. Now by words of affirmation, we're talking about knowing how to edify, how to encourage, to esteem, to motivate, to compliment, just saying things that really benefit and please your partner. It's so interesting because many of us are in relationships and many of us would say that our partner at sometimes can be very dogmatic. They can be, very cynical in their approach, their tone, their disposition, just their entire way of communicating could be horrible, and it really serves to destroy the relationship. And so if you learn how to effectively communicate, if this is someone's love language, you're literally speaking life to them and giving them the love that they need. The second love language is quality time. Now, this is interesting because when I counsel couples, all types of issues come up. This very rarely comes up, but it is usually one of the biggest issues that they have. It was an awesome book written by a gentleman entitled The Time-Starved Marriage. And it talks about how oftentimes in your marriage, you get so caught up with the busyness of marriage. Because in essence, a marriage and a relationship are 2 different things. If you really look at it, your relationship represents your ability to emotionally connect, right? Effective communication, sexual fulfillment, personalities coming together and blending. That represents your relationship. But your marriage represents duties and responsibilities and obligations and parenting and working and paying bills and co-laboring in a household, managing the house, right? It's very specific to duties and tasks. And what happens is when we say I do, many of us give up our relationship for the sake of the marriage. Why? Because when you were dating, it was all about you and your partner. It was all about connecting. But somehow once you got married, your relationship went to the bottom of the priority list. And so many couples don't date anymore. They don't participate in recreational companionship. They don't do all the things that they once did to really enhance that relationship. And so when you give your partner quality time, it's almost like reigniting, the passion and the love that you once had. So quality time is found through a number of different things. Once again, being intentional now of dating. Oftentimes couples don't date anymore. So what Danielle and I do, we date on a weekly basis. Every Friday is date night. We participate in recreational companionship. If we're in the house, we'll take the time to enjoy time together. So there's time, quality time is different than what we call physical proximity. Well, what does that mean? You can be physically in close proximity with your partner, but be in two completely different worlds. Because if I'm on the couch with my wife, and I'm scrolling through my phone, and she's searching on the internet, yes, we have physical proximity, but our minds and our emotions are in two different directions. So that does not represent quality time. Quality time is often coupled with quality conversation. That means that we are in sort of like a no technology zone, if you will. We're not distracted by the phone. We're not distracted by the internet. We're not looking on Facebook. We're engaged in dialogue with one another. Or we have what we call quality time, where both of our interests are pointing in the same direction. So if we're watching a movie together, a television show together, that is an example of quality time. So if this is your partner's love language, you need to do your darndest to communicate their particular love. Now, the next love language that we see, receiving gifts. Now this is a tricky one, because some of us have the tendency to believe, well, why does it have to be about gifts? What are you, materialistic? What are you, a gold digger? But if you think about it, when you said I do, you began that relationship with what? A ring. Because this ring represents your eternal love, commitment, and faithfulness to one another. That's a gift, folks. Well, just as it's important to initiate your relationship with a gift, it may be just as important to maintain the relationship with a gift. Now, interestingly enough, my wife loves receiving gifts. And in the beginning of our relationship, I naturally did it, because that's what you do. You put your best foot forward, you give surprises, your dates, you're very romantic, and that's the natural tendency when you're dating. But then when you get into a committed courtship, that begins to wane over the course of time. But it was still a need for her. And I discovered that it was a need for her because that's how she grew up in her home. Because her father was the one who would give her gifts, representing his love for her. So that becomes her love language even today in our marriage. And so for her, it's not about, just like for many people, it's not about how much you spend on the gift. It's not about name brands. I mean, technically, you can buy an expensive gift, a cheap gift, or you can make your gift out of paper mache. What it means is you were thinking about me. It's what the gift represents. It represents you care about me, you went out of your way to do something nice for me, and as a result of that, love units are deposited into my love bank. I feel loved. Isn't this powerful? The next one, acts of service. That is the fourth love language. Now that happens to be my particular love language, because in my life I have a business. And my business requires certain skill sets. My wife happens to have certain skill sets that I need in order for me to do successfully what I do. So when she's given me her time, her brain power, her efforts, her talents, her tasks, I feel loved. Now, outside of a business setting, in my home, I love to have a well-kept home. So when things are taken care of and there's proper management of the household, it's almost like she's speaking into my heart. It's attaching itself to my emotions. I feel loved. And so if that is your partner's love language, listen, do not discount it. Do not minimize it, but do whatever you can do to communicate your love for your partner through acts of service. And finally, we see that the last love language is physical touch. Now, this is where many of us get tripped up at, because somehow we equate physical touch with sexual intimacy. And they're completely different. By physical touch, we're talking about non-sexual touch. And the reason why certain partners have an aversion to physical touch is because they know that there's an agenda attached to it. There's a goal attached to it. That if you're touching me, it's only because you want something. It's only because you want to be sexual. And so we need to send a clear message that when we're offering our partner physical touch, it has nothing to do with us. It's not for our benefit. It's for the partner's benefit. So you have to learn to touch for the sake of touching. Expressions of non-sexual touch would be holding hands in public. It would be rubbing your fingers through your partner's hair, giving each other, shoulder massages or back massages, or cuddling up on the couch together. Anything that displays physical interaction, because that level of physical warmth represents love and affection. And if that is your love language or your partner's love language, you have to effectively articulate that and give them specific details of how they need to communicate that particular love so that it works. But here's the question. If my love language is different than my partner's love language, we have a problem. And the reason why most couples struggle is because we have a tendency of loving our partners the way we want to be loved. So if my love language is physical touch, my wife's love language is words of affirmation, I naturally will love her through physical touch. So because that's my love language, I feel like, wow, she would love to receive that. But the more physical touch I give her, it almost becomes repellent to her because that's not her love language. She needs to be loved through words of affirmation. So as I communicate her love language and she communicates my love language, it's almost like becoming bilingual, right? It's so interesting. When we lived overseas in a Spanish-speaking country, we didn't know the language. And so I remember my wife got involved in the community and began to interact with the people, and she picked up Spanish so much so that she became fluent. She was bilingual. So she had her primary mother tongue, English, and her secondary language, which was Spanish. Well, all of us have a primary love language and a secondary love language. And so it is highly critically important for the both of you to identify it, to share it with one another, learn to become bilingual so that you can communicate in each other's love language. Now, when you do that, you've reached the sweet spot. Your relationship has gone to another level. Read the book, listen to the audiobook, take the 5 Love Languages 5-week challenge. Let it begin to revolutionize your relationship, because if you do that, all of the issues that you once had will begin to surely or slowly dissipate into non-existence. Get the book. That is this week's Book of the Week.